Before we begin, I have a challenge for you. Watch this video all the way to the end. If you don't enjoy the gameplay, don't subscribe. If you don't enjoy the comeback, don't subscribe. If you don't think this channel has potential, don't subscribe. But if this video earns your support, then prove me wrong and hit that subscribe button. Today, we're playing War of Dots, and the odds are against us from the start. During the battle, we lose 2 cities, putting us at a serious disadvantage. Most players would think the game is over at that point, but we refuse to give up. The question is, can we recover from losing 2 cities and still claim victory? Let's find out.
I am playing as the blue team in this match. We both start by placing our units on our cities to generate funds and build up our armies. Seeing an opportunity early on, I decided to attack one of my opponent's units. I thought I could destroy it before his nearby forces had a chance to support it. Unfortunately, I miscalculated. His units arrived faster than I expected, and instead of taking out his unit, I ended up losing my own. It was an early setback and gave my opponent the advantage in the opening stage of the game. However, I wasn't completely out of the fight. Shortly after, I managed to eliminate one of my opponent's troops, which helped balance the position a little and recover some of the ground I had lost from my earlier mistake. After that, my opponent retreated his units on the southern front to heal and regroup, and I did the same. Meanwhile, on the northern front, he suddenly attacked one of my light units with 2 tanks. I quickly brought in reinforcements, and he responded with more troops of his own. The battle on the northern front had begun. I managed to partially encircle one of my opponent's units, but he answered by partially trapping my light and heavy units. Thankfully, I was able to get them out before things got worse. As the battle continued, my opponent lost 2 units in the exchange, giving me the upper hand and putting me firmly ahead. After gaining the advantage, I felt like I had the battle under control. The fighting was intense, but things were generally going my way, and I was looking to press my lead even further. Then the worst happened. I lost one of my tanks in the fighting, and 2 of my light units were encircled and destroyed. It was a major setback and a costly loss for my army. At this point, the momentum had shifted back. After the heavy fighting, my opponent pulled back slightly to straighten his lines and give his damaged units time to heal. I decided to do the same, using the pause in the action to reorganize my forces. The calm didn't last long. My opponent soon launched another attack, and the battle quickly intensified once again. Both sides traded units in a series of fierce engagements, but the exchanges were not going in my favor. I lost another unit due to an encirclement, adding to my growing casualties. By this point, I had lost nearly 100,000 troops, while my opponent had lost around 80,000. The situation was becoming increasingly difficult, and I needed to find a way to stop the losses before the gap grew even wider. I managed to destroy several of my opponent's units, but despite those successes, I was still suffering heavier losses overall. The battle was slowly starting to slip out of my hands, and I was struggling to regain control of the situation. Sensing an opportunity, my opponent launched another major attack. This time, his forces pushed dangerously close to my capital. For a moment, it looked like I might lose the city and the game along with it. However, while defending the capital, I spotted an opportunity of my own. My troops managed to encircle a large portion of my opponent's army, trapping many of his units with no way to escape. The encirclement proved devastating. My opponent lost a significant number of units, and many of the survivors were left with very little health. This successful operation helped close the casualty gap and put pressure back on his forces. Even so, the battle was far from decided. Despite his losses, my opponent still had around 20,000 more troops than I did, meaning I was still at a numerical disadvantage. My opponent launched attacks on both the northern and southern fronts at the same time. In the south, the fighting went in my favor, and I managed to encircle and destroy one of his units. The north was a different story. I lost 2 of my tanks in encirclements, and my opponent began putting heavy pressure on one of my cities. Fortunately, he eventually pulled back before he could capture it. While the north remained difficult, the south continued to go well for me, and my opponent was steadily losing units. However, while trying to finish off one of his low-health units, I pushed my troops too far forward. That mistake allowed my opponent to counterattack, and several of my units ended up trapped in an encirclement. As the battle dragged on, every fight became more important. There were no easy victories anymore, and every mistake could cost valuable units that were becoming harder and harder to replace. The fighting continued on both the northern and southern fronts, and the losses kept mounting. I lost around 5 to 6 units during the battles, while my opponent lost only 3 to 4. These were significant losses, and the exchanges were not going in my favor. My army was slowly being worn down, and my opponent was starting to take control of the battlefield. With the momentum on his side, he launched new offensives against my cities in both the north and the south, putting my remaining forces under heavy pressure from every direction. Eventually, he broke through my defenses and captured my city in the south. Meanwhile, my northern city was barely holding on. My remaining forces were struggling to keep the enemy away, and the situation was becoming more desperate with every passing moment. I couldn't hold my northern city for much longer, and eventually, I lost it as well. At this point, my troop count was getting dangerously low, and the battle seemed almost impossible to recover from. But then, I noticed something important. My opponent had moved almost all of his forces from the southern front forward, leaving his captured cities vulnerable. This gave me the opportunity I was waiting for. I quickly launched a counterattack and managed to retake my city in the south. At the same time, I also reclaimed my city in the north. This sudden turn of events caught my opponent off guard. A large portion of his army became trapped between my forces, cutting them off from support and allowing my injured troops to finish them off. What looked like a losing battle was suddenly starting to turn around. After being pushed to the edge, the battle suddenly turned around. My opponent had lost his troop advantage after the encirclement, and the situation had completely changed. The army that was once dominating the battlefield was now struggling, and seeing the battle slip away from him, my opponent decided to surrender and gave me the victory. Now, let's come back to the challenge I gave you at the beginning of this video. I challenged you not to subscribe unless this video truly earned your support. If you enjoyed watching this battle, the unexpected comeback, and the way this game went from a near defeat to a victory, then maybe I proved that this channel deserves a chance. So if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join me for more War of Dots battles, strategies, and intense comebacks.